The insult didn't land softly. It sliced through the first-class cabin like metal on glass.
FK off.
Someone like you doesn't sit here.
The blonde woman didn't whisper it. She fired it upward, chin-lifted sunglasses still on, claiming a seat that was never hers. Around her, the cabin stilled the kind of stillness you feel before turbulence hits. A man 2 rows back paused mid-sip.
A teenage boy lifted his phone, already recording.
Even the hum of the overhead vents seemed to hesitate. And then there was her. The woman in the yellow coat. Tall. Composed. Dressed in a structure so sharp it could cut the air around her. She held her boarding pass exactly at eye level, not shaking, not pleading. Just offering it like a quiet piece of evidence the world would soon regret ignoring. Her eyes didn't flicker at the insult. Not even once. But the rest of the cabin did. A middle-aged man by the window stared at her, confused, not sure whether he should speak or stay silent. Someone further back muttered, "Damn, she didn't deserve that." But no one intervened. Not yet. The blonde woman shifted in the stolen seat, smirking as she tightened her grip on the armrest as if first class were a throne and she'd just protected it from an intruder. The yellow-coated woman breathed in slow, steady, deliberate. A breath that didn't tremble, not even under the heat of a dozen staring eyes. "That's my seat," she said, voice low, but sharp enough to command the entire row. The blonde scoffed, flipping her hair. "You people always try this? Go find your section." A flash of something not anger, not fear, but recognition crossed the black woman's face. Recognition of a moment she'd lived before. Recognition of a pattern the world still refused to see. She glanced once at the teenager recording, once at the seat number, once at the woman blocking her path. Then her phone buzzed softly inside her clutch. She didn't look away when she answered it. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here." Now back to her. The woman in yellow lowered her phone, her voice calm enough to chill the air. "I'm sitting here. Whether she knows why or not." And for the first time, the blonde woman's smirk flickered just a hairline crack, but the cabin felt it. Because somewhere beneath the insult and the entitlement, a storm was already forming. Quiet. Controlled. Inevitable. She didn't rush. That was the first thing people noticed. While the blonde woman in sunglasses fumed in stolen luxury, the woman in yellow simply stepped forward, one measured move at a time, as if she were walking through a room she already owned. Her coat caught the overhead light, sharp and golden, drawing every pair of eyes in the cabin, whether they wanted to look or not. The boarding pass in her hand didn't tremble. Her voice didn't waver. Her presence didn't shrink. A businessman in seat 3C leaned toward his wife. "Is she first class?" he whispered. His wife didn't answer. She just watched everyone did. The blonde woman scoffed again, louder this time, like she wanted an audience. "You're blocking the aisle. Show some manners." But the woman in yellow didn't bite. She had learned long ago that some battles aren't fought with volume, they're dismantled with composure. She glanced at the seat number. 2A. Her seat. A flight attendant finally approached, tall, white, wearing that polite, polished smile that never quite touched the eyes. "Ma'am," he said, turning not to the woman in yellow, but to the blonde already lounging in the seat. "Is everything all right?" She pointed upward at the standing woman like she was reporting a spill on the carpet. "She's trying to take this seat. Handle it." The attendant nodded sympathetically to the wrong person. Then he turned to the woman in yellow with a tone dipped in condescension. "Let me see your boarding pass. First class is reserved for premium passengers." A soft wave of murmurs traveled through the cabin. The teenager filming whispered into his mic, "Bro, she is premium. Look at her." But the attendant didn't even look at the boarding pass extended clearly toward him. Instead, he gestured back toward economy. "I'm sure there's been a mix-up. Let's get you to your correct section." Her jaw tightened, a tiny motion most people wouldn't catch. But the camera caught it. And so did the trainee flight attendant lingering by the galley, eyes wide, lips pressed, recognizing a protocol violation but too afraid to speak. Then came the moment that shifted the air. The woman in yellow lowered her hand boarding pass still between her fingers and said quietly, "Are you telling me you won't even look at my seat assignment?" The attendant hesitated. Not long, just a blink. But a blink was enough, because the cabin felt that blink. And so did the blonde woman whose confident smirk faltered for the first time. Somewhere deep in the aircraft, a slow storm began to gather, a storm built not of shouting or chaos, but of one woman's refusal to be erased yet again. And this time she wasn't backing up. The hesitation should have corrected the moment. Instead, it cracked it open. The attendant straightened, masking uncertainty with procedure. "Ma'am, you're disrupting pre-boarding. If you don't move, I'll have to call security." Security. For standing in front of her own seat.
A low murmur rolled across the cabin like a quiet wave.
Someone whispered. That escalated fast. Another voice muttered. She didn't even raise her voice.
But the blonde woman in the seat only doubled down, stretching her legs arrogantly as she tapped the armrest with her manicured nails.
"Honestly," she said loudly, "if Airline stopped letting everyone in here, this wouldn't happen." A few heads snapped her direction. A couple stared at her in disbelief. But she didn't care. She was performing. The woman in yellow remained still. No flinch. No retort. Just a long breath through her nose, measured like someone trained to stay steady in the center of chaos. The attendant moved closer, his tone sharpening. "Ma'am, I asked you to step aside." He reached for her elbow. And that's when the tension shifted from uncomfortable to electric. A man in 4F sat up abruptly. "Hey, she's not doing anything wrong." A woman across the aisle pulled her phone out discreetly. The teenager recording whispered, "Don't touch her, dude," but the attendant didn't hear them or pretended not to. His fingers brushed her coat sleeve. It was enough. The entire aisle held its breath. And then, the first crack in the system arrived. A young trainee flight attendant, small, anxious, barely in her second month, stepped forward from the galley with a timid voice that somehow carried across the cabin. Sir, I saw her ticket earlier. She's assigned to 2A." The attendant shot her a sharp look, the kind that warned subordinates to shut up. "That's not verified. Stay in your lane." But she didn't step back. Not fully. Her hands trembled, but her voice tried again. "I scanned it. It was green." A ripple tore through the cabin. People straightened. The blonde woman stopped tapping the armrest. The woman in yellow finally spoke, calm but cutting, "So you did see my seat. And you still refuse to look." The attendant's jaw clenched. He opened his tablet defensively, tapping the screen. "Your name isn't listed under 2A anymore. Someone else is assigned." Yeah. "Me," the blonde chimed in, smugly lifting her champagne glass. "They gave it to a real member." But the trainee shook her head, desperate now. "No, that's impossible. I saw her name." Someone must have the attendant hissed enough. Silence. Sharp. Tense. Heavy. And in that silence, the entire cabin realized something was happening. Something more than a seat dispute. Something wrong. The woman in yellow didn't raise her voice. She didn't move. She simply said, "Interesting. Seats don't reassign themselves." A quiet storm gathered behind her words, the type of storm that destroys everything built on arrogance, bias, and lies. And it was only getting started. The cabin didn't breathe. Not for a full second. The trainee's words, shaky, timid, almost swallowed by her own fear, still managed to hit the room harder than any insult. "I scanned her ticket. It was green." Green. Verified. Valid. Undeniable. The senior flight attendant shot her a look so sharp it could have cut through the galley door. "That's enough. Step back," he ordered, voice low but laced with authority he no longer truly held. She didn't step back. Not all the way. Her shoes stayed rooted halfway into the aisle, like her conscience refused to retreat, even if her courage wavered. A passenger in 3D lifted his phone higher. Another leaned out from the aisle seat, whispering, "She's telling the truth, I heard the scan too." And then from the far end of the cabin, an older black woman in 6A spoke, "Voice steady, baby, don't let him silence you. Say what you saw." The trainee swallowed hard, eyes flicking between them, the tablet, her supervisor, and the woman in yellow, who stood perfectly still, neither encouraging nor stopping her. Just watching. Allowing the truth to decide whether it wanted to live or die here. The trainee inhaled sharply. "I saw her name," she said louder this time. "It was assigned to 2A.
Someone must have removed it.
Every head turned. Removed? Not reassigned. Not updated. Removed. The blonde woman shifted uncomfortably in the stolen seat, gripping the armrest as if the truth might yank her out of it. Her sunglasses no longer hid the flicker of worry crossing her face. The senior attendant snapped back, "That's absurd. Our system doesn't just remove names." But the trainee didn't fold. "Then check the logs," she said, barely above a whisper, but somehow firmer than anything said so far. Murmurs erupted. A couple in row 5 exchanged looks. The teenager recording whispered to his phone, "Oh, this is getting real." The woman in yellow finally turned her gaze to the trainee, calm, steady grounding, the kind of look that tells someone you're not alone anymore. "You saw my name?" she said softly, because it was there. "You know that?" The trainee nodded. A small nod, but powerful. The senior attendant exhaled sharply, tapping hard on his tablet, trying to maintain control. "It doesn't matter," he muttered. "She wasn't listed when I checked." The cabin reacted instantly. How convenient. Sounds like someone's covering up. That's not how seat maps work. A man in 1C leaned forward, voice, "Cold? Are you falsifying assignments?" The attendant's face drained of color. But before he could answer, the trainee whispered the line that broke the last thread holding the lie together. "I didn't want to say anything, but I saw him delete her name." The blonde woman gasped. The passengers froze. The camera phones rose higher. And the woman in yellow, she didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She simply said, "Quiet, precise, devastating thank you for telling the truth." The first witness had awakened, and the cabin would never go back to sleep again. The confession should have ended it. Instead, it ignited something darker. The senior attendant's jaw tightened, embarrassment twitching beneath his skin. He stepped closer, too close, crowding the woman in yellow, as if intimidation could rewrite what the trainee had revealed. "Ma'am," he said sharply, "you're creating a disturbance. I'm asking you one last time to step away from that seat." He didn't wait for her response. His hand came up fast, impatient, reaching for her arm. Gasps burst across the cabin. A woman in row 4 clapped a hand over her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh, no." He didn't. The phone camera zoomed in. His fingers brushed her coat sleeve. And the world around her slowed. Not theatrically, not magically, but in the way trauma slows time, stretching milliseconds into something heavy, sticky, unforgettable. Because she'd felt that touch before. Flashback, age 19. Red-eye flight from Atlanta. She stood at the boarding gate holding a standby ticket she'd fought for at the last minute. A gate agent placed a firm hand on her shoulder and said, "You're not priority material. Step aside." She remembered the sting, not of the words, but of the assumption. The casualness of it. Like bias was standard procedure. Flashback, age 23. She booked business class for her first international conference. A flight attendant blocked her from entering the cabin, palm out, smiling politely. "Sweetheart, this is business. Economy is back there." He touched her elbow to guide her away. Like she was lost. Like she didn't belong anywhere worth sitting. Flashback, age 27. Her company's first contract, her first real success.
She flew to New York to sign the deal.
A man grabbed her by the forearm as she tried to take her assigned seat and said, "Don't pretend you can afford this." Patterns. Always patterns. And now here again, A hand on her sleeve in a cabin she helped redesign on an aircraft her money helped certify under a brand her influence had quietly kept alive. The flashbacks snapped away. She stood still. But something in her posture shifted, a quiet unbending. The senior attendant didn't see it. He was too busy trying to salvage authority. "You need to follow instructions," he barked, gripping tighter. This time she pulled her arm back. Not violently. Not theatrically. Just enough to mark a boundary the whole cabin felt. Her voice landed like controlled steel. "Do not touch me again." The blonde woman in the stolen seat sat, frozen sunglasses now useless against the reality forming around her. The trainee stepped in panic, flooding her face. "Sir, please. She's right. This is against protocol." But he snapped quiet. That single word broke the cabin open. A man in row 1 rose halfway from his seat. A woman stood blocking the aisle. Someone said, "This is unacceptable." Another yelled, "She's done nothing wrong." The cameras kept recording. The witnesses multiplied, and the woman in yellow, breathing steady eyes sharp, understood one thing: this was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a moment, a fracture, a crossroads, and whoever crossed the line next would not walk back unscathed. The shouting, the phones, the rising heat in the cabin, none of it moved her. Instead, the woman in yellow reached into her clutch with the same calm precision she'd used all morning. No hurry. No panic. Just intention. A soft chime echoed as she unlocked her phone. The senior attendant froze mid-breath, realizing too late that the tone in the cabin had shifted from confrontation to documentation. Her voice was quiet, measured, unmistakably controlled. "Connect me." 2 words, soft enough to be polite, sharp enough to silence 3 full rows. On the other end, a calm, efficient voice answered almost instantly, "Miss Carter, I'm here. Is this related to the flight the passengers blinked?" "Ms. Carter." First name withheld. Professional. Respectful. Not how assistants address ordinary passengers. "Yes," she replied, eyes fixed on the attendant who had grabbed her. "Activate Sky Protocol 12. The cabin reacted before the attendant did. "Protocol? What protocol? Who is she?" But the assistant didn't hesitate.
Sky 12 is live.
"I'm alerting the board now." The senior attendant paled. He stepped back a full foot, suddenly unsure whether to speak or vanish. "Ma'am, this isn't necessary," he tried.
She cut him off without raising her voice.
"You touched a passenger without cause. You dismissed verification. You ignored a witness. You altered records." Her tone didn't rise, but each accusation hit like a controlled detonation. "You created the disturbance." "Not me." The blonde woman in 2 gulped, shrinking into a seat that was rapidly becoming radioactive. The trainee stood frozen, caught between terror and vindication. Her phone buzzed again. She answered without breaking eye contact. "Go ahead." Her assistant's voice came through crisp as ice M's. Carter logs confirmed the deletion. The seat map was manually altered at 4:17 p.m. from the crew tablet assigned to flight attendant H. Reeves. Gasps rippled across the cabin. The senior attendant wilted. The blonde pressed a hand to her chest. The trainee whispered, "I knew it." Her assistant continued, "Also 3 prior complaints filed against the same crew member for discriminatory behavior. All unresolved." The board chair is requesting a live update. A collective murmur rose, disbelief, outrage, dawning clarity. The woman in yellow lowered her phone slowly, deliberately. Then she said the words the cabin would quote for months good. "Keep the line open. It's time we finish this properly." The cabin wasn't just watching anymore. It was aligning with her row by row, witness by witness, against the injustice unfolding in front of them. And the crew, they were beginning to understand this wasn't a passenger. This was the reckoning they never saw coming. The tension in the cabin wasn't rising anymore. It had peaked, suspended in the air like a held breath. All eyes were locked on the woman in yellow as she lowered her phone, her movements slow and deliberate, as though she were placing the final piece of a puzzle everyone else had been too blind to notice. The senior attendant tried to recover, straightening his shoulders. Ma'am, regardless of whatever call you just made, you still need to comply with crew instruct. She stepped closer. Not aggressively. Not even confrontationally. Just intentionally. And the entire cabin leaned in with her. Is that your final position? She asked. The attendant blinked. What, your final position? She repeated, calm as a surgeon. Before this goes on record. The blonde woman shifted in her stolen seat, anxiety trickling into her voice. Wait, why is this suddenly so serious? She's just making calls. Anyone can pretend the woman in yellow turned slightly, just enough for her gaze to land on the blonde without giving her more attention than necessary. Anyone, she echoed softly, can pretend. The cabin felt the weight of that word. But it was nothing compared to what came next. She turned back to the attendant. The man who had deleted her name grabbed her arm, humiliated her publicly, and spoke with a clarity that left no room for oxygen. I am Theodora Carter. Silence. Not the shocked kind. The absorbing kind. Like the aircraft itself needed a second to register what it had just heard. But she didn't pause. Which means she continued, I am the one who authorized your last crew evaluation cycle and the one who approved the acquisition that saved this airline 2 years ago. The senior attendant's lips parted soundlessly. The blonde woman shook her head in disbelief. No, that can't be a man in row 2 whispered. Oh my God, Carter Aviation Holdings. That's her. Someone else added, she's not just a shareholder, she's one of the owners. The cameras caught everything, the dawning horror, the collapsing lies, the shifting power. The trainee covered her mouth, eyes wide, whispering, I knew she was somebody but Theo Carter wasn't finished. She leaned slightly toward the attendant voice, now low enough to cut. You tore up my assignment. You censored the logs. You put your hands on me. And you told me what was it that I didn't belong in my own seat. The cabin collectively exhaled, a sound raw with disbelief and satisfaction. Then she delivered the line that would go viral within the hour, the kind of line that cracks systems in half. You called me a problem in a company I own. Phones rose. Passengers gasped. Even the blonde woman slumped, sunglasses sliding down her nose. And the attendant, he stumbled back like her words had shoved him physically. Because in a way they had. Theo Carter wasn't just revealing the truth. She was reclaiming the room. And the room, every row, every witness, every camera was now undeniably, irrevocably hers. The moment her title hit the air, something invisible and fragile snapped. Not loudly, not violently, just irreversibly. The senior attendant's posture collapsed first. His spine, once stiff with authority, bent as though the very weight of his actions had finally settled on him. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to deny, but nothing came out except a thin, wheezing breath. The blonde woman in two gripped the armrest so hard her knuckles whitened. She tried for a laugh, a weak, trembling one. This is a misunderstanding. I didn't know she was Theo, didn't even look her way. The ignored apology hung in the air like a limp flag. Her phone vibrated softly. She lifted it. Go ahead, head. Her assistant's voice came through, crisp and merciless. Ms. Carter, the board is on standby. The crew member's record is confirmed, and the FAA liaison has been notified per Sky 12 protocol. Shall I proceed with suspension? Passengers reacted physically. Small jolts of shock, widened eyes, whispered, oh my God. A man in row 1 whispered into his camera, she's literally firing them mid-flight. This is insane. The senior attendant stumbled forward, desperate now. Ms. Carter, please. I can explain. She raised her hand. Not loudly. Not sharply. Just enough to silence him. You touched me, she said. You deleted my seat assignment. You ignored your trainee. And you lied in front of an entire cabin. Each accusation dropped like a stone into still water, ripples of truth spreading out, impossible to deny. The trainee swallowed hard, stepping forward with a courage she didn't know she possessed. Miss Carter, I'm sorry. I tried. Theo turned to her, and for the first time that day, her expression softened. You did the right thing, she said, and you'll be recognized for it. Hope flickered across the trainee's face, small but real. Then another voice broke the tension. A passenger in 4A older stern, a man who had watched the entire ordeal, silently spoke up, ma'am. If it means anything, we all saw what happened. Every word. Every touch. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Murmurs rose in agreement. She's right. They targeted her. You don't treat people like that. We've got the videos. The senior attendant wilted further. Theo lifted her phone again. Proceed, she said. No anger. No satisfaction. Just finality. Her assistant's voice returned understood. Effective immediately, Flight Attendant H. Reeves is suspended pending formal investigation. Access to crew systems revoked. ID flagged.
Status locked.
The attendant's tablet went dark in his hands. His ID badge buzzed red. A soft gas escaped him before he sank into the nearest jump seat, hollow, stunned, undone. The blonde woman in 2 covered her face, whispering a curse under her breath. But the collapse wasn't over. Theo stepped slightly closer to her seat, and said with quiet precision to A. Now. The blonde slid out of the chair without protest, without eye contact, without dignity, like someone evacuating a throne they never earned. Passengers watched, not cheering, not gloating, simply witnessing justice unfold in real time. Theo placed one hand on the top of the seat, finally claiming what had been hers from the beginning. A truth settled over the cabin in a slow, heavy wave. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply reclaims its place. The cabin was quieter than it had been at any point since boarding. Not empty quiet. Not awkward quiet. But the kind of quiet that follows a storm when everyone realizes they just watched something wrong unravel and something right take its place. Theo Carter slid into seat 2A with the unhurried grace of someone reclaiming what had always been hers. Her yellow coat settled perfectly against the leather, the gold accents catching the softened cabin light. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply existed in the space that had been denied her, and that alone felt like a declaration. Across the aisle, the trainee stood straighter now, breathing deeply as if the cabin itself had given her permission to have a spine. Passengers nodded at her small gestures of gratitude for speaking up. A man in 1C leaned into the aisle. Ma'am, just for the record, what you did that was overdue. A ripple of agreement traveled backward. She handled it better than anyone would. Calm the whole time. That's real class. The blonde woman, now exiled to the jump seat near the galley, avoided everyone's eyes. Her earlier arrogance had drained out of her like a leaking bucket. She clutched her purse as though it could protect her from the shame. The suspended senior attendant sat rigid, his tablet dead in his lap, eyes unfocused. It was astonishing how small a man could look once stripped of the authority he had misused. The remaining crew members approached cautiously, unsure how close they could get without crossing another line. A new attendant, one who hadn't been involved, stepped forward, voice trembling. Miss Carter, would you like some water or anything at all? Theo looked up, her expression smooth. No, thank you, she said softly. Just continue your job. Treat your passengers fairly. That'll be enough. The words landed like quiet instructions, not demands, a reminder, a standard, a course correction. The trainee's eyes welled slightly.
She wiped them quickly, embarrassed, but Theo caught the gesture.
You did what others wouldn't, Theo said to her. That matters. The trainee nodded, shoulders lifting with a pride she hadn't dared feel before. Behind them, 2 passengers stood to adjust bags in the overhead bin, but really they just wanted a reason to speak. One whispered, "This plane feels different now." The other replied, "Yeah," like decency snapped back into place. Theo settled deeper into her seat, but her posture remained elegant, aligned, unshakable. The storm she contained within herself had never needed thunder. Only precision. And as she looked out the window, The runway lights blinking in calm rows beneath the fading dusk, she exhaled the first true breath she'd taken since the confrontation began. Not in relief, not in triumph, but in restoration. For herself, for the witnesses. For every unspoken version of this moment she'd endured in silence over the years. She wasn't just reclaiming 2A. She was reclaiming every space she'd ever been told she didn't belong in. The plane hadn't moved an inch yet, something in the cabin had traveled a long distance. From arrogance to accountability, from humiliation to truth, from silence to something stronger. Theo Carter sat perfectly still in seat 2, gazing out the window as if the night sky were listening. Her reflection in the glass was calm, composed, unbroken, the portrait of a woman who had fought 1,000 silent battles and learned exactly when to unsheathe her power. A few passengers lingered in the aisle, pretending to stretch or adjust carry-ons, but really they were waiting not for drama, not for spectacle, but for her. The woman who had turned injustice into order without ever raising her voice. The trainee approached again, slower this time, carrying a fresh glass of water she wasn't sure Theo even wanted. "Ms. Carter," she said softly, "if there's anything else you need." Theo turned her head, meeting the young woman's eyes with a steadiness that melted the last bit of fear from her posture. "What I need," Theo replied, "is for you to remember that integrity outranks seniority. Always." A soft exhale escaped the trainee, relief, respect, maybe even pride. "Thank you," she whispered before retreating back toward the galley. The other passengers didn't retreat. A man 2 rows ahead leaned over the seat, voice cautious but sincere. "You changed the entire tone of this flight," he said. "People like you, we need more of that." Theo offered him a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then another passenger, the older woman from 6A, stepped into the aisle with the slow confidence of someone who'd lived enough life to recognize the shape of justice. "You didn't yell," she said. "You didn't threaten. You didn't crumble. You just corrected the room." Theo's lips softened into the faintest hint of a smile. "I didn't raise my voice," she replied. "I raised the standard." The word settled into the cabin like warm gravity, grounding, firm, unforgettable. Even the blonde woman, silent and shrinking in the jump seat, lifted her head slightly, as if the truth in those words stung more than any punishment could. The suspended attendant sat motionless, staring at his darkened tablet, as if replaying every moment that had led to his collapse. No one pitied him. No one excused him. They simply acknowledged the truth he had authored his own downfall. As the last of the murmurs faded, Theo rested her head against the seat and let her eyes drift back to the window. Outside the runway, lights pulsed in quiet lines, a rhythm she'd followed her whole life. See the injustice. Endure the moment. Correct the system. A truth hummed through the cabin, unspoken but undeniable. She didn't come here to prove she belonged. She was the standard for belonging. And as the engines finally hummed to life, something else settled into place. Dignity had been restored. Not demanded. Not begged for. Simply claimed. What happened next wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even immediate. It was gradual, like a cabin relearning how to breathe. Row by row, seat by seat, people adjusted themselves, not physically but morally aligning with what they had just witnessed. A wrong corrected. A truth restored. A woman who refused to bend. A man in 3, quietly lowered his phone, ending the recording, but not the awe in his eyes. He leaned toward his seatmate. "She didn't just defend herself," he murmured. "She reset the whole plane." Further back, a young girl whispered to her mother. Why were they so mean to her? Her mother squeezed her hand. "Some people need to see someone strong before they see what's right." The trainee moved through the aisle, collecting scattered cups and napkins, not because it was necessary, but because she needed something to do with her hands. Every time she passed a passenger, they offered her small nods, quiet smiles, the kind that said, "We saw your courage, too." She paused beside Theo's seat. "Miss Carter," she said tentatively, "I filed a note in the system documenting what really happened." I hope that was okay. Theo looked up, warmth flickering in her gaze. It was more than okay, she said. It was the first honest thing this crew has done today. The trainee's shoulders eased gratitude, loosening her breath. A few rows back, the blonde woman shifted uncomfortably in her jumpseat, cheeks flushed with humiliation. She clutched her purse tighter, trying to vanish into the wall she'd once felt entitled to command. But now no one defended her. No one offered comfort. No one excused what she'd done. Because accountability doesn't always look like handcuffs. Sometimes it looks like silence, the kind directed at those who were loudest in their wrongdoing. As the cabin resettled, a new attendant, clearly summoned after the suspension, arrived to take over duties. She approached Theo's row with genuine professionalism. "Miss Carter, I'll be handling the rest of the flight," she said. "On behalf of the crew, I'm sorry." Theo studied her a moment, her steady hands, her honest tone, her willingness to step into chaos and restore order. "Thank you," Theo said softly. "Just treat your passengers the way you'd want your family treated." "That's enough." Behind them, the engines finally hummed, preparing for taxi. Yet the plane felt lighter than before, as if a weight had been lifted from the cabin walls themselves. A man across the aisle leaned closer, voice low. "You know," he said, "most people yell to get respect. You didn't raise your voice once." Theo looked ahead, eyes steady on the darkening runway. "That's because respect isn't earned by volume," she replied. "It's earned by truth." Her words lingered, settling into every row like a quiet doctrine. The passengers weren't just on a flight anymore. They were witnesses transformed, awakened, aligned. And as the cabin lights dimmed, one truth became clear: justice had found its place on this plane. And it wasn't leaving. The runway lights slid past in slow ribbons of gold as the plane began its taxi, humming steadily beneath the passengers' feet. But inside seat 2AA, different kind of movement unfolded, not forward, not upward, but inward. Theo Carter sat with her hands folded loosely in her lap, the yellow fabric of her coat glowing softly in the dim cabin lights. The roar of earlier tension had settled into something gentler, heavier, almost sacred, the afterglow of dignity reclaimed. Outside the window, the night stretched wide and endless. She watched her reflection flicker across the glass, calm, unshaken, exactly who she had always been. But now the entire cabin finally saw her too. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Miss Carter, the older woman from 6A, approached, slowly steadying herself on the headrest in front of Theo. "I just wanted to say," she murmured, "you taught something today. To all of us." Theo turned from the window, meeting her gaze. "Did I?" she asked quietly. "Yes," the woman said. "That strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands its ground." Theo exhaled, a gentle breath, acceptance settling into her bones. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing that." The woman nodded once respectfully before returning to her seat. Minutes passed. Not much was spoken yet. Everything felt said. Then the teenager who had recorded the entire encounter hesitated beside her row. His phone hung awkwardly at his side. "Ma'am," he whispered. Theo glanced up. I just wanted you to know," he stammered, "that video's already blowing up. People are calling you a hero." "A hero," she repeated softly, almost amused. "I didn't come here to be one." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it real." She offered him a small nod, not approval, not dismissal, just acknowledgement, and he slipped back into his seat. The engines deepened their rumble. The plane turned toward the runway lights, dimming further. As the nose lifted off the ground, the tension of earlier finally broke away from the cabin like old skin peeling off. Passengers relaxed into their seats. The new attendant moved calmly through the aisle, her professionalism grounding the space. Even the blonde woman, quiet now, chastened, stared at her hands as if rethinking her place in the world. Theo leaned back, the hum of ascent vibrating through her spine. There was no triumph in her expression, no gloating, no satisfaction, just clarity. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't spectacle. It wasn't even a lesson. It was a reminder. A reminder that respect is not optional. A reminder that silence is not submission. A reminder that justice is not loud, it's precise. The plane climbed higher city lights, shrinking into scattered embers below. Theo closed her eyes, letting the darkness settle over her gently. Tomorrow the world would know what happened. Tonight the cabin already did. And as the aircraft pierced the quiet sky, a final truth settled over the passengers like a soft blanket. She never raised her voice. She never begged for space. She simply claimed the dignity that was already hers. And the world, starting with one plane, shifted to meet her.